What's up, guys? People seem to like that Fiendsmith Tierra deck I posted earlier, so I figured, hey, I got tons of meme decks, I'll post some more. Probably about half of the time I spend playing this game is with goofy decks like this. This one is going to be a little bit lower power level than the Tierra Fiendsmith one. I would say you could comfortably hang out in Platinum with this deck. We're focusing on Blackluster Soldier of Chaos this time. So we'll give him a quick read here. Link 3, he needs 3 monsters with different names. If he was link summoned with a level 7 or higher monster as material, then the opponent can't target it with card effects, and he can't be destroyed by the opponent's card effects. And then if he destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can activate one of these effects, permanently boost him by 1500 attack. He can make a second attack during your next battle phase, or you can non-targeting banish a card on the field. These effects are not once per turn, hence why you would be able to use the double attack, right? You can trigger this twice. So, at first glance, might not seem super impressive, but the protection is actually nothing to sneeze at, right? Being untargetable and indestructible, that's the same thing as a Crusadia Avramax made using IP, right? So a lot of decks famously have trouble outing a card like that, but the big difference is that Avramax has that attack boosting effect too, right? When he battles a special summon monster, he gains attack equal to theirs attack, so he always wins battle, whereas Soldier of Chaos does not. He's just at 3000 until you trigger his boost. So if you make this guy turn 1, the opponent's probably not going to have too much trouble just walking over him, right? And what's more, he doesn't do anything threatening, right? He didn't have any kind of quick effect or any sort of like ignition effect that you could trigger easily on their turn, so they're probably not even really gonna bother committing any sort of resources to out this. They'll just do their normal plays, pull out a big monster at some point, and then walk right over him, right? But we can kind of use that to our advantage, and we can catch the opponent off guard. That's why I call this deck Counterpunch, because we're gonna use trap cards that will lower the opponent's stats, so when they go in to battle him, we'll flip these up in the damage step and make their monsters smaller than the Soldier of Chaos, which will actually trigger his effect on their battle phase. And you can really throw a wrench in their plans at that point. Nobody expects you to be playing battle traps in 2025. I almost said 2024. Nobody expects battle traps in 2025. So this is a surprisingly effective way to make use of this card, and I personally think it's hilarious watching people just punch their monsters in and lose their cards. They get their stuff banished. This guy boosts himself and becomes even harder to out. Really funny stuff. So let's quickly go over how we're going to actually summon Soldier of Chaos to begin with. And the primary method is going to be the pump cards. These cards are really strong. The standard combo is going to easily put the requisite materials for Soldier of Chaos on board with just one card, either starting with Itali or Zayamin. We're also playing Ogre Dance this time to search the Zayamin. I'll have some replays this time, actually, so if you're not familiar with the standard combos, you'll be able to see them. I didn't have replays for the Fiendsmith Tierra deck because most of the duels we did with that, it was all on my friend's account, but I've built the deck from my own account too, so I'll see about getting some replays for that, and I'll post that as a separate video for y'all. But anyway, we'll do the standard punk combo. That'll let us make Soldier of Chaos with one card. In the process, we'll also draw 2 cards off the field spell, and we'll search the Dangerous Gabu. This is sort of like an imperm. It's just a targeted effect negation. So, yeah, we'll have this guy out. We'll have a little bit of disruption here, and we'll have 2 extra cards drawn, which is important. That'll help us get to the trap cards here, the battle traps. Also, to facilitate Soldier of Chaos, we've got a normal Horus package here, 3 King Sark, 3 Imseti, 1 Duamatef, 1 Hoppy. You could play Kabesinef if you really wanted to. You could cut, probably just cross out, right? But I chose not to. These guys are all level 8, so they fulfill that that level 7 or higher condition for Soldier of Chaos, and of course they're just good cards independently. So they synergize really well with with what we're trying to do here. You can like discard them for Foxy Tune and stuff, right? You can use them for synchros with the level 3 tuners and stuff. Just a great set of cards. Now let's actually talk about the battle traps we're using specifically. So Lost Wind is definitely the best one. If you're not familiar with this card, it's a low rarity powerhouse. You target a face-up special summon monster on the field, negate its effect, and its original attack is halved. That is permanent. And then if the opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck while this card is in the graveyard, you get to set it, but banish it when it leaves the field. So that's super duper strong. Having the attack of a monster is basically always enough to ensure that your 3K Soldier of Chaos will win. The effect negation obviously is very useful as well, and the fact that immediately after you use this card, if they go into the extra deck, it just comes right back and it'll be ready to go on your next turn. Very, very strong. One important thing to note with this card, though, it can target your own monsters, and it only negates special summoned monsters. So if you end on Soldier of Chaos, he also, by the way, only protects himself from being targeted by an opponent's card effect. If you end on a Soldier of Chaos, you have a Lost Wind set, and your opponent normal summons something with a good effect, and you go, oh, I want to negate that. Master Duel is going to show you, hey, you want to activate Lost Wind? Don't do it. If you activate it, you're going to be forced to target your own Soldier of Chaos, and you will be very sad. So keep that little tidbit in mind. Now, not quite as good as Lost Wind, but for some reason higher rarity is Titanocider. This card is very similar in that it also negates effects, and this one actually drops the attack to 0, both permanently. But Titanocider can only target monsters that were special summoned from the extra deck. Keep that in mind, they have to have been summoned from the extra deck. If, like, a Synchro monster hits the graveyard and then comes back out from the graveyard or something, you cannot Titanocider it anymore. Also, Titanocider is once per turn, Lost Wind is not. Bear that in mind. And then it has a similar recycling effect here. If the opponent special summons from the extra deck while this card is in the graveyard, you get to set it, except you cannot use it on the same turn that Titanocider was sent to the graveyard. And that makes this card much, much slower. Because under normal circumstances, let's say we go first, we set a Lost Wind. On the opponent's turn, we'll flip it up, we'll use it on something, it'll hit the graveyard, they'll probably go into the extra deck again, Lost Wind comes back out, when turn passes back to us, it's already ready to go if we need it, right? Titanocider, on the other hand, if we go first, we set our Titanocider, on the opponent's turn, we flip it up. If they go into the extra deck, we don't get to set the Titanocider, right? Because it was sent to the graveyard this turn. Turn passes back to us, they're probably not going to summon from the extra deck on our turn. Then turn passes back to them, they go into the extra deck, now you can set the Titanocider, but it was set this turn, so you still can't use it. Turn passes back to you, then you can use the Titanocider. So it's like 4 turns to get this card back. Super duper slow. It doesn't banish itself when it leaves the field, but I mean, it's just, a duel is never going to last long enough for that to be particularly relevant, right? If you reuse the Titanocider at all, that's already a very long duel. So it is basically just worse than Lost Wind, right? As we mentioned, having attack is basically as good as setting it to 0 for the most part. And it's really nice to be able to target stuff that didn't come out of the extra deck, but it's relatively slim pickings for these kind of cards, so we do what we can, right? Titanocider, it's good enough. The last one we have is Ice Barrier. When an attack is declared involving your opponent's monster, you change its attack to 0, negate its effects, and it can't change its battle position. That's all permanent. The biggest thing to note about this card is that the activation window is specifically when an attack is declared involving your opponent's monster. So that means you can't wait until the damage step to use Ice Barrier. If you don't know about damage step rulings, it's important that you have at least a few of them in mind for playing a deck like this. You can activate certain effects during the damage step, but not other effects. One of those is stat manipulation effects. So Lost Wind and Titanocider, both of those change stats, so you can activate them during the damage step. And the other big thing that you can use during the damage step is you can use cards which negate activations, right? So like if they have a Baron up and you activate Lost Wind, they can negate with Baron, right? Because Baron negates activations. Importantly, though, a card like Fiendsmith Desiree that has to target a card on the field and then negate that card's effects, right? It doesn't negate an activation. So if someone makes a Desiree and then you flip up a Lost Wind in the damage step, there's nothing they can do about that, right? They can't respond to it. The way that you can tell if you're in the damage step in Master Duel is that little like orb thingy that sits on the right-hand side of the screen and tells you what phase you're in. During the battle phase, once you enter the damage step, a little red D with a number next to it will show up underneath. That tells you you're in the damage step. The number tells you which sub-step of the damage step you're in. And you can activate these stat manipulating cards during D1, D2, and D3, but no later than that. So keep that in mind, pay attention to it. But right, again, with all that in mind, Ice Barrier cannot be used during the damage step. You have to use it on attack declaration, so that's a bit of a downside. But otherwise, you know, it will pretty reliably help you win combat. It has another effect here involving level 5 and higher water monsters. This effect will be live sometimes because we do play a level 5 or higher water monster. It's this guy, Dwamitef, right? But don't use that extra effect, okay? If you use it, you can't special summon monsters until the end of your next turn, except waters. This will make you dead in the water. Do not activate that effect. But that does it for the main deck, right? It's a pretty straightforward, simple plan. As far as the extra deck goes, outside of just our combo pieces, we play Punk Amazing Dragon and Psychic End Punisher. These are good for going second or like on turn 3 scenarios. Just generally powerful cards, the best level 11 synchros to be making. We play a couple 8s and a Zeus, just staple stuff for the Horus cards, they might come up. And then we just play a handful of good generic links. Plus, I threw this card in here as just, I think he's really funny, but it is a UR, so if you don't want to craft this, absolutely do not spend your dust on this. It's not even particularly good, but it is super duper funny. It needs 3 level 5 or higher monsters to make it. It's got 3,500 attack. Cannot be used as link material. And it's unaffected by monster effects. So he's like a pseudo towers, and you can't even use an underworld goddess to out him, because he can't be used as link material. So that's pretty funny. And if you make him using 3 monsters that had 3 different types and attributes, usually that's the Horus guys, because they're all mismatched, he has this ignition effect to destroy all other cards on the field, which is really, really funny. It does also get rid of your own King Sark, bear that in mind. And he has this other effect to like summon a World Legacy monster. We're not playing one of those, but yeah, this guy is hilarious. So if you happen to have one, or if you want to meme on people extra hard, you know, you could keep that in mind. But otherwise, you can just play whatever other good staple you want here. You know, play like a number 38 or something. On the topic, by the way, of the cost of this deck, you can get Soldier of Chaos from the Gaia and Blackluster Soldier structure deck. So he's pretty cheap to get your hands on. And if you already have like Horus and Punk stuff, then this deck as a whole is actually very cheap. Just a few SRs, really. So with that, let's take a look at some of those replays I saved. I got 2 of them that show kind of the 2 different ways that the deck will usually shake out. So these were both in Platinum 3. That's about where you should expect to be hanging out, middle of Platinum with these decks. So we're just going for our normal Punk combo here. Now, at this point, the opponent actually does have a hand trap here, so they're going to cut us off of the field spell. That's a pretty big deal. The field spell would give us 2 draws, and it would let us summon Madam Spider to get the trap. When you target Wagon, you do get the draw card, so we still get at least 1 card, and we find Titanocider. Pretty important. We didn't have any battle tricks previously. And because we did draw King Sarcophagus, we will still be able to put the monsters on board that we need to in order to make the Soldier of Chaos. So we just bring back the Rising card, but it doesn't really matter what monster you bring back with Deer Note most of the time. I tend to pick the level 8, like, just in case somehow the other card gets removed. I'd like to have as many level 7 or higher available as possible. He's going to hit me with a Bestial. There's lots of Bestials going around right now, of course, with all the Fiendsmith cards. People want to counter that. So be prepared for Bestials. If you do actually have the field spell will banish a punk monster from your graveyard, right? Banish Foxy Tune, because that's usually your only light. And that'll prevent them from being able to use a Bestial if they top deck it. Anyway, I let the Lubellion resolve here without ashing it, because even if I ash it, he already has a Bestial on board. He can just pull it out anyway. I don't really care about him adding another Bestial that much. Much better to ash the Engraver here. That'll keep him off of Tract, which will massively limit his ability to flex the Fiendsmith cards. There goes that Foxy Tune that I was talking about. Ogre Dance, worth noting, by the way, that's a Dark. So if you start with Ogre Dance, then you'll actually have another potential Bestial target in the graveyard. Just bear that in mind. So he tributes out Engraver here. Goes for the Requiem line. Another thing to keep in mind with Fiendsmith everywhere, the on-field effect of Fiendsmith, where he can equip a card, or rather, if a card's equipped, he can like send it off and then send a monster. That targets. So he cannot use that on Soldier of Chaos. And you'll notice as well, he actually summoned anything that threatens the Soldier of Chaos yet. It takes him a little while with this engine to get into something that's able to beat over it. But he does get there eventually here. The Lacrima attack nerfing effect actually comes in. But when he goes to battle phase here, we just flip up our Titanocyder, we negate the Lacrima. And there it is, we successfully counterpunch him. I go ahead and take the double attack next turn. Normally that's the one you would choose least often, because when you boost him up to 45, it's actually quite hard for him to punch over at that point. And the banishing effect, of course, is just relevant for dismantling the opponent's board. But you can see here, I knew he wasn't really going to be able to end on anything that would threaten me. So the double attack will make it that much easier for me to find a lethal line here. I know that he has nothing relevant to send off the Beatrice. He just sent Tract last turn, right? So that's not going to do anything. So we're just going to go for a quick synchro here, normal summoning that Madam Spider that we left around. Working so nicely with the Horus guys, we can throw down a Pep. If you're not familiar with this card, he's unaffected while our life points are equal or lower to the opponent's. And he gains attack equal to the difference in our life points at the start of the battle phase. So I don't go for Imseti here because I know he has a Baldrake. I threatened battle phase there, and that made him use the Baldrake. He tries to Veiler the Pep, but that's not going to do anything. So now that I see the Baldrake, I go for Seti. He's a DD Crow, but it doesn't matter. I've actually already got lethal set up here with a double banish from the Soldier of Chaos. We can maximize our damage here. We can banish Druis Worm so that he doesn't get to use that effect to send one of our cards. Banish the Baldrake, and that's a clear field for Pep to connect. So a pretty decent win against a pretty competent deck. Let's see the second replay here. This is probably going to be the way you win more often, which is not actually by getting them with the surprise counterpunch move, but just using the traps as like good control tools. Even if you're not dropping their stats in the battle phase, the fact that they're permanently having their stats lost means that anything they leave on field is just easy prey for the BLS. So once again, we're going to do our usual punk combo here. We drew Deer Note, which obviously is not very good, but if you draw almost any of the individual garnets in this combo, you can still do the line. You just have to adjust it a little bit. So in this case, we can summon the Deer Note using the field spell instead of... normally you do Madam Spider off the field spell. Instead, we'll just grab the Madam Spider with our Rising Carp, and then the field spell will summon out Deer Note. So it'll end up being more or less the same. We've already got the Lost Wind in hand, of course, and we're going to get to draw 2 more cards here off of our jam session. So it's looking like a pretty good setup. We draw another one of our battle tricks. BLS should be pretty hard to get rid of at this point. So here we'll add another Zayaman off of Dragon Drive. It doesn't do anything for us at this point, but just paying the life points is good to trigger Field Spell, and if we find our way into like the Horus stuff, it'll be nice to have these extra cards in hand. So now we can just slap down our Soldier of Chaos, set a bunch of back row, and we're in pretty good shape. Opponent is on Fiendsmith stuff again. I actually make a little mistake here. I forgot that Ash Blossom was under Called By, but so did our opponent. So we kind of get away with one there. But regardless, he will be getting into his Fiendsmith stuff. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit while he does his combo. So normally in these kind of cases, I'm going to try to prioritize using the Titanocider because it's more restrictive. So when I find a good opportunity to use that, I'll go for it first. So here this looks like the best chance. I go ahead and hit the sequence. Unfortunately, what this does mean is that when he makes his final push here, and I hit it with the Lost Wind, his turn's pretty much over. So I'm not actually going to get to reset my Lost Wind yet. It's going to be a little while before we find that card again. But we did completely shut him down there. Very simplified game state, and that's where a card like Soldier of Chaos is really going to shine. Because if he has limited resources, it's just that much harder for him to find something that's actually going to out it. So because of that here, I take the attack boost. I'm really trying to solidify the defensive capabilities of my Soldier of Chaos. Ice Barrier is like a fine top deck. It's not exceptional, but it should get the job done here, especially because once he goes into Requiem here, we get these cards back. All we have to do really is survive for another turn, and then these trap cards should be enough to seal it out. He's just kind of spinning his wheels here. He tries to use Engraver Effect. I guess he didn't realize that he couldn't target Soldier of Chaos. That'll happen sometimes. A lot of people, of course, just don't read cards. So clear that easily, and we'll take the double attack. I don't need to boost any further, and of course there's nothing to banish. And with another trap card laid down, he's pretty much toast. So you can see, even with an engine like Fiendsmith that's so resilient, you know, it keeps coming out of the graveyard over and over again. We're on turn 6 here, and we're holding our own. The recyclability of your trap cards is honestly just so powerful. Of course, you know, it does take a little bit of luck, or your opponent usually needs to make a mistake to beat a good deck with a more mediocre deck, like the one we're playing here. You know, that's just kind of what makes the decks good, is that they're going to beat these kind of decks more reliably. But if you just find even a little opportunity, you'd be surprised how good this stuff is, right? You know, Baron can't out Soldier of Chaos. He tries Sequence again. The Lost Wind we had set. Can't do anything about it. And he knows it's over. GG. So that's a bit more of a typical picture of how playing with this deck actually goes. You know, as hilarious as it is to hit people with the surprise destruction during their battle phase, you don't even need to, you know? You can just use good trap cards and sit on a sticky guy, and it's a pretty fun time. So hopefully you guys like this deck. I'll try and get some of those Tierra Fiendsmith combos, try and get some replays, and I'll post that in a separate video. Leave some comments, let me know what y'all think of the deck, if you try it, how it went for you, and I'll catch y'all later.